Okay, now start. Hello everyone and welcome to the Academic Tech Talk. This is the last session for the Windows Phone 8 development, and as we know, the objectives from these sessions is to learn how to build Windows Phone 8 apps. So we decided to give Windows Phone Mobile as a prize for who will develop the best application and publish it on the marketplace. So you have 1 week to create application. Hurry up, please. I will announce the winner through email and social media. So good luck, everyone, and you can start, Pavel, now.
Okay, thank you. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yeah.
Good. This is the last session on Windows Phone development. So this is the stuff I want to cover today. I want to talk about application lifecycle to understand how Windows Phone 8 application works and what happens when I switch to another application, and how can I manage the state so that the user doesn't know the application has gone away. We'll talk briefly about accessing web services from a Windows Phone app, and then we'll look at some of the nice features of Windows Phone, especially live tiles. We'll see how we can update our live tiles from the application and from something more interesting called push notifications, which allows me to update tiles, not just tiles, from the Azure cloud service. And lastly, we'll talk briefly about launchers and choosers and how we can start up or use built-in Windows Phone applications from our own application. So these are the topics. Let's start. So the first thing we need to talk about is application lifecycle. So when we're working with the regular applications, when we switch between applications, nothing happens to our old application. It still works as usual. Nothing. The operating system doesn't do anything special to that application. In Windows Phone and other mobile devices, this is more of a problem because we have a battery which is limited, and we have CPU and network resources which are also more limited on the mobile device. So what happens is that when the user is working with some application, the application is in a running state, everything is normal, but when I switch to another application, the application actually becomes dormant. That means it's going to sleep in a way, so it doesn't get any CPU time, so that the current foreground application can get the most CPU and network resources. And that's something that's very important for the user, because he's now focused on another application, and of course it's also important for battery life. So what can happen then? So one of the things that can happen is that application can become a tombstone. Tombstone means that there are many dormant applications. That means their state is preserved, they're still in memory, but they get no CPU time. However, the number of dormant applications can become very large if the user opens more and more applications. Eventually, the memory may start to run out. So the operating system may decide to put some applications, no more than 5, in a tombstone state. In a tombstone state, the application is removed from memory. That means there's more memory for other applications, but still some state is maintained, which is mostly a navigation state. So when the application is back again as a foreground application, actually there's no state. So if the application doesn't do anything special, all the work the user has done simply goes away. So we need to take care of that. Technically, the application can get completely terminated. That means there's no trace of the application. That can happen if the memory is very stressful, and 5 applications are already tombstoned, and there's a need to free more applications. Then the first tombstone application will simply be terminated. That means the application gets no notification about that. It simply is killed, and that's it. And again, that means that the next time the user launches the application, it will be no in the state the user left it with. It's completely starts afresh. So if we don't save any state, we're in trouble. So what happens is that we get notifications when things happen. That means when the application is activated or launched or deactivated, that means it becomes dormant, we get a chance to save and load state. And we can take that opportunity to make sure that when the user gets back to the application in whatever way, it still has the same state and the same UI as it was previously. And that's a challenge, and we have to deal with that to get the best user experience. So let's see a quick example. So those of you that were in the first session or saw the first session, we created a simple application that was kind of a paint-like application. Let me run that application quickly. So we have a kind of paint application here that we can draw something. Here I'm drawing something. And what happens is that if I'm going to the start menu and running some other application, and then going back, and then going back again, I'm back in my app. And that works okay because my application has become dormant when I click the start button. It's no longer the foreground application. But because all the memory of the application is still maintained, I can get back to that and lose nothing. However, if I get into a stressful situation when my application is tombstoned, all these lines will go away. Another thing that can happen is that if I'm pressing the start button here, I'm running some application, I'm pressing start again, and I'm running the same application, the quick draw application. So I'm not using the back button. Notice that I get nothing. That means the application is actually launched from nothing, so there is no state. The application doesn't run from what remains in memory. So how can I deal with that? So there are a couple of things I need to do. The first thing I can do, which is a new feature of Windows Phone 8 that wasn't available in Windows Phone 7, is I can tell the system that if I'm running the application again, but it is available as dormant in the backstack, please go back to that running instance and don't launch a new instance. The way to do that is looking at the manifest. Now, if I double-click the manifest, I get that graphic view of the manifest, and this option that's called Fast Resume is nowhere to be found. In this case, I have to go to the actual XML and add that option. So I can right-click and select something like View Code, which is the quickest option. And I can get here where I can see the actual XML that is my manifest, which usually gives a graphic view, but some settings currently cannot be done using the user interface. We have to do that with XML. So what I want to do here is go to this default task element here, and there's another option here called Activation Policy, which can be resumed or replaced. By default, it's replace, which is the thing we saw just now. The application has, the new instance has replaced the old instance. This is the only behavior possible in Windows Phone 7. And now I'm going to select Resume. When I do that and run the application again, look what happens now. I'm drawing something. I'm pressing the Start button, so now my application is in the background, but it is still in the backstack, and I'm going to run the application again. I get back to the previous instance with my state intact. So that's one thing I can do to make my application come to life really quickly, because it's still in memory, and I actually didn't have to write any code for that. However, if the application is tombstoned, that won't help me, because in tombstone mode, or if it's killed entirely, I get nothing. It's not in memory anymore, so Fast Resume cannot work, and we simply launch a new instance. So I still need to do some state management in case the application becomes tombstoned or killed. So how do we do that? So one thing we need to do, if we look at the application right now, we're using some the the logic uses the mouse events here, such as mouse move, to create a line object, and then add that line to the canvas. Now that's a kind of problematic thing that I'm doing here. I have to now go to the canvas and save all the line objects in some way, and then I need to restore those lines when needed. That's not a very easy thing to do. And the reason for that is that I'm working with controls. Working with controls is not something that I have control of, pun intended. That means I can't control how a line works, and I can't save a line as easily as some other stuff that is application specific. So I want to first move to an MVVM model, to a model based on the idea of data binding. Hopefully you've seen the second installment in this series where I talked about data binding and MVVM. So what I want to do is work with data and not with controls. When I work with data, I can manipulate the data and represent the data in any way I want, which will be very convenient. And then I will use data binding and perhaps data templates to actually make the data visible in some meaningful way. So we need to do that a bit differently. So here's what I did already. I don't want to bore you with a lot of code typing. So I've already done that. I'm just going to walk you through what the things that I've done in this quick draw app. So the first thing I did is create a view model. That means I've created objects or types that represent my data. Let me now just close everything here so I can start from something easier to see. So we have a main view model class here, which holds a drawing object. And the drawing object is something that I've created that holds a collection, technically an observable collection. Observable collection is similar to a list, but observable collection can notify interested parties when elements or objects are added or removed from the collection. So it's very useful for data binding scenarios, and Windows Phone binding system looks for that collection, or more specifically the interface that collection implements, so that it knows when new objects, in this case of type line drawing, are added or removed. So I'm actually creating some model here that really has nothing to do with the actual user interface. I'm simply representing logically what I'm going to use. I have a line drawing object which has 2 points, a color and a thickness. And I have a drawing which consists of a bunch of lines. And I also maintain current thickness that, if you remember, we can change with the settings page, and the current drawing color. I want to save that as well, so that when the user gets back to the app, these are the same as when it left the app. And to make all this work correctly, I want to mark my classes as data contracts. We're going to use that with a serializer that can save these objects technically into XML, but actually can be some other format. So data contract is an attribute I'm going to place on a class, and data member on every property or field that I want to save. If I don't do anything like this in line drawing here, that means that every public property is going to be saved. In this case, this is what I want. In some cases, not what I want, and so I can be more explicit about it. Use data contract and data member, which is, I guess, a little easier to understand. So I have this drawing that contains a line drawing object, and my main view model, which is also a data contract, contains that drawing. Here's a property of that drawing, which is a data member because I want to save that. And there is a selected color index that I'm saving as well, which is something something I want to preserve. In this case, the selection colors here that help property for myself, I'm not saving that because it uses constant colors, so I don't need to save that at all. So I'm not marking that property as a data member. So I have some model. So how does that tie into the user interface? So in the application constructor, I'm creating that view model. I'm creating a new view model and making that the default data context. That means that's going to be the default source for data binding. So now when the page wants to display those lines, it can refer to that data context. So what I'm doing here is using the canvas in somewhat non-traditional way. I'm actually using an items control, which is a bit strange because what we've seen when we run the application, we've seen some lines. So how can these show any lines? Let me run that for a moment, which is the modified application. We can see there are some lines here. Let me clear the lines and start from something new. So there are lines here, but this is actually an items control, kind of a list box. It's not really just a canvas. The secret here is using some of the customization options of items control, namely items panel. I've actually shown that in the movie application in the second session. There I've used a wrap panel from the Windows Phone 8 toolkit, but here I'm using a canvas. That means the items are hosted in a canvas. And each item is drawn using a data template which contains the actual line object, and it binds to the line drawing property with the appropriate properties. That is point1.x, point1.y, and so on. And also binding to the stroke, the thickness property, and binding to the color. Just as a reminder, here's the line drawing class. That's exactly the properties I'm currently binding to. So binding is a very powerful aspect of this application. So my user interface actually doesn't deal with the data directly, but just binds to it. That's a very powerful way to work because I can, in my main page, I'm actually I'm not adding line objects into a canvas. Instead, I'm just adding line drawing objects into my drawing model. That means I'm simply using data. I'm not adding any controls, but because of data binding, the lines are created automatically because of the appropriate data template. That's a very powerful way to work, and that gives me the freedom to work with the data in any way I choose. So now I want to make my application be able to survive termination or tombstoning. So how can I do that? Clearly, what I want to do is save my main view model object, which is currently a global object right here. It's a static property of the application object. I want to save that when appropriate. So when the application does not becomes the background application, it becomes dormant, the Windows Phone sends me an event. That event is called deactivated, which I'm registered to. This is actually code that Visual Studio added for me when I created the project. All I have to do now is actually save this state. So how do I do that? So every application in Windows Phone has something called isolated storage. Isolated storage is a store, kind of a file system that's private to the application. Only the application can write or read from that storage, and it's persistent. That means that even if the application is closed or terminated or anything like that, this data is not erased. It's kind of a disk. It's kind of a disk storage for the app. So I'm using this static method, getUserStore for application, to get the root folder for my isolated storage, and then I can do whatever I want, such as create directories, create files, and do whatever else I need. So in this case, I'm calling the create file object, method, and using a file called drawing.dat, just something I invented, doesn't really matter, and I'm getting back a file stream. This is similar to a stream that we know from the regular .NET. It's a more special kind of stream that's used with isolated storage, but it is a stream nonetheless. It inherits from the stream class. So you can use that like any other stream. So next, what I want to do is save my main view model. How to do that? One simple way, if I'm using data contract and data members, I can use a data contract serializer which knows how to serialize data contract marked objects. So I'm saying, here's a serializer. I want you to serialize objects of this type. And here you have a stream to serialize to. This is our isolated storage file stream. And here's the actual data. So the write object method writes main view model anything else it contains. That means the drawing, the lines, everything. It does that recursively, no matter how complex the object, and writes everything into that file. It's actually based on XML, and we can use the Windows Phone power tools if we want to, which are available on CodePlex, to actually examine that file in real time, real life. I will not show that, but we actually can do that to make sure that actually something happens there. So I'm going to run this code when I'm being deactivated. I have a few seconds that I can use to save state. Later, one of two things can happen. Either I'm activated because I've been dormant and the user pressed back or something, or in some other sense. So I can say, if the application instance is preserved, that means the same instance, then the memory is preserved, so I don't have to do anything. But if this is a new instance, for some reason, then I want to call my load state method that loads the state. And also when the application is launching, it's a new instance, for sure. Perhaps I've saved the previous drawing, so I want to load the state as well. So load state is a method I'm writing right here, which is very similar to this code that saves the state. Is simply the reverse. I'm getting again the root of my file system, opening this time the file for reading. So I'm not going to create that. I want to open an existing file. I'm using a try catch handler here because it may be possible that the file doesn't exist. So I don't want to cause an exception to crash my application. So I'm simply going to swallow that exception silently because I don't really mind. And then if that file actually exists, I'm going to create again the serializer, tell it that I'm going to work with these kind of items, and then call the reverse of write object here. I'm going to call read object. Read object accepts the string and returns the root of the objects that I've saved. It returns the main view model instance with everything in it. That means the drawing, the lines, everything is there. So I'm going to place that in my property and again make that the default data context. That means the default source for bindings. And because data context changes, the bindings are refreshed and everything should work out as expected. So now I want to test that. How can I test that? So the simplest thing is simply to place breakpoints. I can place breakpoint here and here and see what happens. Let me run with the debugger. So I'm getting to load state here from the launching event. And because that's the first time the application has launched, perhaps I want to load the state. So for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go back to the phone and I'm going to, I want to uninstall the app. I want to start from nothing. So I want to uninstall the app. When uninstalling an application, all isolated storage for the app is also cleared. So now I'm going to run it actually for the first time with the debugger. So it's going to get to my load state, but that load state will find that the file doesn't exist and it's going to throw an exception. You can see I'm getting to my catch handler here, and it says that something is wrong with the file that I've tried to open, and I'm okay with that. So I'm going to continue, and now I can draw whatever I want. Let me draw something. Now I'm going to go to the start screen. And notice I'm going to get my breakpoint hit in the deactivated event. So this is my chance to save state, because after that my application can be terminated, and that probably won't be a good thing. So I'm going to go over that, create a serializer, and save the state. I'm going to write the object, and I'm done. So now my application is in the background, doesn't do anything, doesn't consume any CPU cycles. I'm going to launch the application again now. So let me launch that again. And I'm getting back to load state again. This time I can load the state from the for my application because I've actually launched a new instance. I'm not using fast resume yet, so I'm launching a new instance. So let's see if I can restore the state. So this time the file should exist, and it does. And I'm reading the object and it reads correctly, and I'm going to set that to data context and run. I can see my state returning. If I've used the fast resume, then that would not be necessary because I simply would have gone back to my existing instance. So if I'm using fast resume, how can I make sure that actually works every time? So how can I make sure my application is actually tombstoned? So it actually is possible. If I'm going to my properties, there's the debug tab here. It says tombstone upon deactivation while debugging. So in this case, even if I'm using fast resume, this will tombstone the application. That means it's going to lose all its memory and will have to restore state. So state management is important. Users should never know whether the application actually was terminated, tombstoned, or got dormant, or anything like that. This is something that should be transparent. And that's very, very important for the user experience. So this is how typically an application can deal with this scenario. So let's move to the next topic. Let's talk about web services. So I'm not going to demonstrate that right now. I'm going to show a demo in a moment, in a few minutes. But generally speaking, we can access web services or WCF services in much the same way we do in regular .NET. We can use the add service reference option in Visual Studio. We're going to get a proxy class, and we can simply invoke methods on that proxy class, and this will actually create the HTTP message and send that to the server, wait for the reply, and so on. Now, all operations are always asynchronous. That's the way Windows Phone works, because we don't want to block or to block the user interface. Don't want the thread that handles the user interface. Don't want that to block, because that would make the application unresponsive, and that's a very bad experience. So there is actually no way to call these web services in a synchronous way, but always asynchronous. Currently, it's implemented using something that's known as the Event Asynchronous Pattern, EAP, which is a very common pattern in .NET, which means I'm going to need to register for an event, and then I'm going to make the asynchronous call, and the event will get called when the asynchronous call returns. It currently doesn't use the task asynchronous pattern, which is the new pattern that uses the task class and the await and async keywords. But that's just, I think, something that's going to change when the wizard is updated with the new code generation. We can, however, get the nice programming model for await and async from the event asynchronous pattern. If I have time, I'll show you that, but but perhaps I won't have time for that. So I'm going to show an example of that in a moment when we talk about push notifications. So let's move on to live tiles. So live tiles are something that's probably one of the most recognizable features of Windows Phone. Those tiles that are on the start screen, they are alive. That means their content can change. However, that's not automatic. We actually have to do some work to make that happen. So if I'm going to some application here, and I'm right-clicking or trying to pin that application, so I'm going to get a live tile right here. So currently the tile is not really alive. It simply shows my default icon, which I haven't changed, and that's certainly not interesting. We want to do something that's more interesting. So our tiles are actually give some information for the user, and perhaps lure the user to click the tile and go into the application. So many options are possible here. I'm going to show you some ideas how to configure live tiles in various ways. So technically, there are 3 types of live tiles in Windows Phone 8. For demonstration purposes, let me just open one of the apps. I've created the movie browser from last time. I've actually enhanced that quite a bit. I'm going to show you in a moment what I've done there. But technically, we go to the manifest, and in the manifest we have the chance to select something about our live tiles. So we have a tile template. That's our first thing to choose. So a tile template gives us one of the 3 options in Windows Phone 8. The template flip is actually the style that was also in Windows Phone 7, and that's the only thing that's available in Windows Phone 7. That actually gives us a way to show some image and some text on the tile, and if we want to, on the back tile as well. So the tile, if it has any back content, is going to flip from back to front and vice versa every few seconds automatically. That's done by the phone. So I can select a small icon, a medium icon, and also a large icon, which is something I can support in Windows Phone 8, which is the large size of icons. Let me show you that for a moment. Let me switch back to an emulator. And for example, we can see the photos here, which are currently in the white tile format. I can actually press that, and then I can make that smaller and even smaller. So that's a kind of an icon, nothing more than that. Can make it wide or the medium size. The medium size is the only available size in Windows Phone 7, but in Windows 8, Phone 8, we have 3 different sizes. So we can support large tiles. We don't have to. Large tiles are useful if you want to have more information presented. So we can have longer text and so on. So template flip is the basic thing. If I run my movie browser right now, so there's my movie browser. You may remember something like this from previous sessions. I'll go to my start screen and then find my movie browser and pin it to the start. So I can see that icon exactly, that icon which I provided right here. Since it has transparent areas, I can see my accent color seeping through here. So that's what I see, which is very, very constant. If I want to have, some content in the back of the tile, I can't actually do that from the designer. I have to go and look at the code. That means the XML. And here I can see everything about the template flip right here. Here's my image URL, and here's the count and number I can show also. I can change that manually, let's say 5 or something. And here I can see my back content that's possible. So I can do something here if I want to. For example, hello back or something. I can have also an image there and something like that. So now when I run my app, so here's my tile. We need to get rid of that. Sorry, let me just, to make the changes appear, I'm going to delete the tile and then go back and pin it again. And we can see that number 5 right here that I've placed in the count property here. And it should flip and show me my other content that I've placed right here. Here's my hello back. I have some space here, that's why I'm getting that space. So this changes automatically. So again, this is very constant, and I probably want to change that, perhaps. So let's talk a bit about the other types of tiles. So except the template tiles, there's a template iconic. It means I can provide some icons and some text. This is very similar to template flip, but I can't use. I can use more freedom with my text. I'm not going to show you that because it's not too interesting. The template cycle is more interesting. because I can select up to 9 images that are going to cycle automatically by the phone. And typically I don't want to choose constant tiles, but I want to choose something that is dynamic, that's coming from the application itself. So perhaps let me demonstrate that. So I have to select at least one. So I'm going to select something from my actual app, that's my default tile perhaps. So let me go to my folder here and simply select the small icon, and I have to select at least one image from the 9 image cycle. So again, that's something to have immediately, but I actually want to make that more interesting by changing that to something more dynamic. So for now, I'm going to remove that tile. Let me remove that. And I want to do some coding. So in this case, what I've done, I have a bunch of movies, and those movies have image URLs. So I want to select several movies and start flipping them. The problem is that the cyclic tiles don't support remote images. So the images have to be local on my phone as part of the application or something else that's part of the phone. And that's a bit inconvenient. Hopefully, in a future version, that's something that's going to be possible out of the box. But in this case, what I'm doing, I'm going to do some extra work. And the extra work I'm going to do is wait for images to load in my app, and then I'm going to save those images into a special folder called shared shell content that's available for live tile consumption. So when the image is loaded, I'm going to get an event thrown here. That's an event that I've actually thrown for my movie list control. Here's my list control, and there's an event I've created called image loaded. And when that happens, I'm going to throw that event, raise that event, and my main page handles that event. It gets the actual bitmap object and then saves that as a JPEG into that special folder, which is part of isolated storage. Because it's part of isolated storage, something that actually survives, and it is considered local and not remote. So now I can use this special prefix for URL to get to that particular image, and now I can use the cycle tile data to indicate what images I want. So I'm simply selecting several images. I can select any number of images up to 9 images, and providing a collection of URIs to those images. But this URI is actually local. The isostore colon here is a prefix that's used to refer to the local isolated storage as a URI. And that's local, so that actually works with cycled images. So to do that, I'm creating a structure that actually has the data to update. And then I'm going to get my main tile by calling this method. Shell tile with active tiles is a property that returns all tiles. And an application can have more than one tile. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And then gets the first one. So if there is a tile, it actually calls the update method, providing that data for the cycle tiles. Let me run that. So now I'm going to go to my start screen, and I want to pin my application. So now we can see some of those movies scrolling by. So here's one movie, and after a few seconds, another movie is going to scroll by. Here's another movie scrolling by. That's Skyfall, James Bond movie, and so on. So that's a nice feature, so we can actually show some changing content so that the tile is interesting, and it's not some static image. And then maybe perhaps the user says, oh, wow, that's interesting. I want to go into the app and learn more about that Iron Man movie, see something about that, for example. So that's an example of using a cycle tile data. So we can use this kind of code to update tiles while the application is running. But that may not be enough, because suppose we have an application that's, for example, showing weather or news. So perhaps I'm not running the application at all, but I have the tile for the application in my start screen. So what happens if a new weather forecast becomes available, or a new news article is available? And the user wants to know about that, but doesn't want to actually run the application. Perhaps I have some server out there that knows when a new news article is available, and he wants to notify all devices using the app that actually this is available. So this is actually possible to do using something known as push notifications. Push notifications is an idea that says that the app doesn't have to run anything. Instead, there is some server that the app sometimes connects to, and that server knows when things need to get updated, and it uses the Windows notification service, which is a service that Windows Azure, the Microsoft Cloud service, provides to actually send a push notification to the device. And this notification can update the live tile automatically without the application running anything. And this is something that's very useful. It's also very good for power consumption. It's very light on power consumption. And it's something that is very useful to have, because the application doesn't need to run. And the tile still can change. And then the user sees the change and may say, hey, that's interesting. There's a new article, there's a new movie, there's new something. I want to click the tile to open the app to actually look at that information. So how does that work? So the basic idea is that when the application is running, it's actually registering for notifications using the Windows notification service. It gets something known as a channel URI. This is a kind of unique identifier that identifies that device, that particular phone, among all the phones in the world that may be using the same application. Because that service eventually has to send notification to all the phones around that register to get that notification. So after we get the URI, we should send that URI to our application server. That's our own server that can be hosted anywhere, that knows when things change. And that's a server that eventually is going to request a push notification and say to the Windows notification service, okay, now I want you to send that particular notification, which may be a time notification or a toast notification or a badge or some other, can be actually some custom notification, to all devices registered for that particular notification. So that's the basic idea. I want to show you a code that does that. So the first thing we need to do for push notifications is for the client to actually register to get those. So my movie application here actually is trying to use push notifications. So the first thing the application does is call some method called setup push notifications. That method calls a method on HTTP notification channel that looks for some kind of channel name, which is simply a string that I've selected, to see whether actually that channel already exists. Because this is something that is preserved from run to run. So if it already exists, I have nothing special to do, just register for getting the actual notification. I'm going to show you that code in a moment. But if there is no channel, that means that's the first time running the app after it's been installed, I can request a new channel and wait for that event to happen. That event, channel URI update, is going to give me back the actual channel URI, which is just, again, a kind of URI, simply URI, which is very long, but this is what I need. So calling this open method actually sends the request to the Windows notification service, which eventually is going to return me a channel URI. We can certainly use the breakpoint to see all that in action. So to see that, I'm going to uninstall my application. Simply uninstall that, so that any channel information is going to be lost, hopefully. And now I'm going to first change my tiles to template flip, which is more appropriate for what I've done here. So it's all, easier to demonstrate. So I need the two images here. I'm simply going to select my default image here. Another thing I need to do is add in the capabilities that I want to actually use push notifications. Otherwise, all methods are going to fail. And by default, that's unchecked. So you need to check that if you want to actually use push notifications. So now I can run my app. And the first time it runs, it's going to call that notification thing. And now, eventually, I'm going to get that event called right here. I can see the channel URI is some ugly link. I don't care about that. Really, I'm simply going to save that. And then what I need to do is call another method, another service, that's going to actually register that URL with my application service. Now, that's something we haven't actually looked at yet. So let's look at that for a moment. So I need to have my own server that understands what are movies. So what I've done for demonstration purposes, I've created a WCF service in Azure. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Windows Azure and how to write services for that, but actually I've used the file new project from Visual Studio and selected the cloud here and created the Windows Azure Cloud Service. And inside that, I've created WCF service. I already have an Azure account. So I've created a service called Movie Notify Service that has a register method that clients from my phone app can provide that unique channel URL that they're getting from the Windows notification service. And then eventually, when some update should happen, I'm going to write my method called sendTileUpdate to distribute that notification to all the devices that have registered for that notification. So all the thing that my register simply does is, let me show you that, is just add that particular URL into a kind of list that I'm handling, monitoring right here. That's simply a list of strings. I'm saving that in a very simple way as a static member so that it doesn't get lost. However, if the service is recycled, if the service is down, then this list is going to go away. So a better idea is to save that in some kind of database. That's something that, for example, is provided by the Windows Azure services, which I'm not going to talk about in this session. However, I'm going to show just a demo that does the work for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to register it right here. So the client now has to call that method. So it's going to need to get to that WCF service. So I promised to show you how to get to WCF service. So here's how to do that. I need to use the add service reference. Let me get to another project which doesn't have that yet. I'm going to use a dummy project here. I'm going to right-click and say add service reference. The same way I'm using that in regular .NET. So my service is in this URL. I'm going to paste that from another window here. That's my actually global cloud service for that movie service. So you can actually use that as well if you want to, as long as that service is up. I'm going to click Go. And hopefully, if everything is okay with networking, you can see that I'm getting to my actual service. I can see the actual operations right here. So I can get that in a friendly way in the C# code. So I'm going to give that some names, such as the movie services, which is going to become a namespace name. And that gives me that movie services here, which now has some classes I can work with, such as Movie Notify Service Client. This is the main class that represents the proxy to my actual service. And there's a tile movie info that I've created in my service. Let me go back to my, to my cloud service. There's a tile movie info here, which I've created, which is a simple structure to provide the information for a new movie. Let's say there's a new movie, and I want to represent it with that simple structure. So that also gets back and recreated on the client from the metadata of the service. So that's exactly what I've done right here. So I have my movie notify service client. I'm going to create an instance of that. That's my proxy object. I'm going to register for an event because everything is asynchronous. And then I'm going to call the register async method, which is going to call this method right here. It's going to get right here by the proxy is going to change that into an XML message, a soft message in this case, and send that via HTTP and so on. It's going to get handled by WCF service in the cloud, and eventually this message is going to be called. So I'm going to register my device as something that wants to get notifications. So that's something I need to do, and I have my server right here that's dealing with that. So now what's left to do is actually make the push notification happen when some interesting event happens. So perhaps I want to create some console application here. It can actually be anything. It can be a console application, WPF application, perhaps the server itself can get information from somewhere. I'm creating a tile movie info object that I've imported from the web service. Give some setting to the properties. For example, here's a URL of an image that I want to actually make that image the tile, the live tile image. I have some text I want to show and some rating I want to give to that movie. And then using service, my own service, to send the tile update. So what does that mean? Actually, sending a tile update is just a matter of making an HTTP post request to that strange long URL we got from the Windows notification service. If you go back to my cloud service right here, I have that method that I'm calling from the client, and that method actually builds the correct message. Now, there's a lot of details here that are not something we can actually remember. We simply have to do it right. For example, the message itself is simply XML that has a particular format. For example, the background image, here's the way to set that. That's the image URI I'm going to send through that my helper class here. I can set a count, that is the number is going to show up in the tile if I want that. I'm going to use the rating for that, and some title to that tile, which I'm going to use the movie name. And there are other elements I can use here, for example, for back content. In this case, I've not used them. And then I'm building up the message. This is just the content, but that's not enough. I have to actually make the content type text XML. I need to calculate the content length. I'm doing that by using the encoding get byte count method with the actual string that's going to be sent away. And I need to add 2 custom headers, which have to be exactly like that. This is something the push notification service expects, and if it doesn't, if it's not provided exactly like that, it's simply going to fail. And what I'm doing now, I'm looping through all my registered clients. That means all my registered devices, which I've kept in this hash set, in this kind of list. And then I'm building an HTTP client and calling the post async method, but providing that URL, which is that long channel URL we got back from the cloud service, and the actual content, which I've built right here. And that actually goes and sends notification to each and every device that registered for that. That actually completes the loop or the cycle. So you can try that. Let me run my app again. Sorry, this is not my app. This is my app right here. So this is my the application here. And if I look at the tile right now, let me pin the tile. So by default, the tile is going to have the default image, which is what I expect. But now I want to run this code, this piece of code. Let me place a breakpoint here before the actual notification. I'm going to run that. So now I'm connecting to my own service. That is the service I've created, so I can connect to that and send the update through that. So I'm calling a method called sendTileUpdate with the movie information. That method is going to get here. That's the sendTileUpdate to my own WCF service. And that's going to ask the Windows notification service to do the push. Because main devices are registered and I'm simply using some client application. So if I go to my phone again and press F10 here, hopefully, if the demo gods are kind to me, I'm going to get the notification, and didn't get it. Probably perhaps it's some delayed in some way, or there's some exception I got. Let me try it again by uninstalling the application and doing that thing again. Let me install that. Let me try it again. Going to run that and pin the app. Maybe the demo gods are not with me today. And run that again to actually send notification. And I'm going to press F5 here, and still nothing happens. So perhaps I'm going to get the push notification a bit later, because it doesn't actually promise us to be immediate. But that's the way to do it. It actually worked about 2 hours ago. So perhaps that will work as well later. Perhaps not. But that's actually the way to do that. So the point is that we need to have that perfect XML build and that perfect HTTP message build so that everything works as expected. That's something that's very important. Any missing piece or something will simply make notification fail. So that's push notifications, which is a very important feature to have, because that's actually something we can do without the application running at all. And a lot of applications are actually built around that. Web applications are obviously candidates for such a thing, and also news applications and so on. So that's a very powerful thing to have. And as I mentioned, we can also use that not just for live tiles, but also for toast notifications, which are kind of pop-ups that just show some important information at some particular time, and even raw notifications. It means we can send some custom notification that if our application is currently running, we can use to do some special thing that may be appropriate. So that's the things I want to talk about live tiles. Perhaps another comment about that. It's also possible to create secondary tiles. Secondary tiles means that there can be more than one tile per application. A classic example again is the weather app. Perhaps I want one tile per location. So every location has a different weather. So I can have several tiles, each for a different location, that are actually changing or updating independently. And that's again possible to do with push notifications. So I'm not going to demo that, but just know that it actually can be done. So that's push notifications and live tiles. And this is something you certainly should consider when creating your own applications. So the last thing I want to talk about in this session is the idea of launchers and choosers. Now, the idea here is that there are a lot of built-in applications on the phone. For example, there's a phone dialer. We can actually make a call. And there's a camera built in. We can actually take a picture. Or perhaps we want to be able to select a picture. Perhaps we want to be able to compose an email. There is an application that can help us to compose an email. So there comes a time that we want to actually invoke one of these applications. So it is possible to do. And these are called launchers and choosers. They're actually using something called as tasks. And the difference between the launchers and choosers is that the launcher doesn't expect any return value. It simply launches some application. And the chooser actually needs something back. For example, if the user wants to select a contact or an address, we want to know what that selection was because we want to use that as an input to some other thing. So choosers return something. We need to register for an event, a completed event, and then in the completed event we're going to get the result. While launchers don't give us back anything, they simply launch a task. Now it is important to emphasize that we cannot actually do the actual operation. For example, we can't actually make a phone call. The best we can do is show the phone calling app and even provide a number to dial, but the user has to press the dial button. It's something that doesn't work automatically. That's a security feature. Otherwise, applications can be used to send emails and make calls, and this is something that's bad. Even when sending an email, what's going to happen is that the email application is going to open. We can even provide a to field and even a body, but the email will not be sent automatically. The user will have to press the send button to actually send the email. That's very important. It's actually very consistent throughout the phone. So let me show you a simple demo of using launchers and choosers. At least launchers. So our movie application right now actually allows us to let me see how the push notification doesn't want to work for some reason. Okay, so we have our app here, and we can actually click one of these movies now and show the movie details, for instance. And there's actually a web link we can go to browse to some link that is related to that movie. This is a functionality that I haven't shown you previously, and I simply added that functionality. And I want to be able to send an email here to some of my contacts and tell them about that great movie, so they would have that link as well. That seems like a nice thing to do. And also maybe I may want to share that link via other social media, such as Facebook or Twitter or something like that. And Windows Phone actually has all these functionality built in. It's just a matter of invoking that functionality. So if I press that email button here, I want my email application to open up. Now, it doesn't really work in the emulator, but I will show you the code to do that. So to do that, let me go to my movie details page. So here I have the application bio built, and there's the two buttons here that say share an email, and I simply created two click handlers for those buttons. So if I'm looking on email, it's actually very simple. All I have to do is create something called an email compose task. This is the class that represents that email sending application. And I can set some properties such as the subject, that's going to be in that email, and a body. In this case, I'm taking the movie out of the data context, which is the object that I'm actually working on, the actual movie object, and I'm placing the movie name as part of the subject, and I'm using the URL, the link, as the body. Technically, I could have even added a to here if I wanted to already give some default recipients for that email. But in this case, I'm leaving it blank. That means the user will have to provide that before the email can actually be sent. And then I'm going to call the show method. The show method for all such launchers simply switches to that task. Now, by the way, when switching to that task, our application actually goes to the background and becomes dormant. So we need to stay in state, because technically it is possible the user will never press the back button. So user may never get back to our application, and that's something that can happen. So technically it's possible, perhaps not that frequent. So that's very easy to do. And for sharing purposes, there's something very, very similar. It's called the share link task, which is simply a different task. I can provide a URI and some message and some title. And then again, I'm calling the show method. That method launches that share app that Windows Phone has built in. It allows the user to select what kind of sharing media he wants to use, such as Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. And then that will simply happen. And again, there's nothing else I need to do about that. I don't have to do anything. I can't actually do anything other than that. So we can look at this namespace called Microsoft Phone Tasks. It has all the possible launchers and choosers we can use. And there's a pretty big list there. So we can invoke various functionality that is very useful, and that makes our application very rich. So it's connected, not just by using live tiles, but also inside the app we can get to some other very useful functionality, such as phone calls and such. And so this is something we really want to use, and something that's very easy to use. So we don't really have to do much work on that. So that's launchers and choosers. So actually, that's the last topic I wanted to discuss today. I want to make some other general remarks about the Windows Phone 8. So the Windows Phone 8 platform is very rich. As I think you got some glimpse of that, there are many other features we can use, such as GPS location. So it's very easy to set up notifications to get changes in position. That's obviously useful for applications such as navigation applications, but can actually be used for other scenarios. We can use the Bing map control, so we can have actually a map that's already there, and very useful to have some application that, for example, has information on locations. They can simply invoke the map and show on the map various icons and so on. So all the hardware the phone provides, such as the camera, GPS, the compass, or whatever, the accelerometer, everything is actually available via the API, and the APIs are pretty simple to use. They're mostly asynchronous. We're simply creating some instance of something, registering for some events, and just listing those events and doing something when those events happen. Another thing I want to talk about briefly is if you are actually working on a Windows Phone application and want to get that to the store, you should probably know that there are some things you need to do to make that so that the application is actually certified. That's not that's not as easy as it may sound. So there are actually several guidelines or rules of what you have to do to make this work. For example, my movie application, which is very nice, is going to fail certification. I'm not sure if you can guess why I'm going to fail certification. And there are actually several reasons there, but currently I can think of several, but one of them is that I'm building a debug version. A debug version is for sure going to fail certification. You should never, ever send for certification a debug build. It has to be a release build. That's the first thing that's going to be tested. Another thing that's very simple, perhaps obvious, but we can miss that, is the idea of the various icons. So in our case, we can see there's those icons that are default tiles. We can't use the defaults. We have to change that. So these are good images. We can't use default images. because they will simply fail certification. If you're using something like networking or GPS or push notification, which is actually networking, we actually have to have a privacy policy. So we have to have somewhere in the application a link that says what the application is doing with GPS or with the network, so that the user knows that, or at least should trust what you're saying. So some privacy statement is mandatory, and that's something that's easy to miss. So there are actually a long list of rules. I'm not going to talk about all of them. That's a kind of a different session. But you should consider that. And the reason for that is that it takes time for certification to actually be approved or revoked. It can take up to 5 days. And what we can do before that is use something called the store test kit, which is something that can give us some automatic testing on our app. That means going to do some automatic testing, looking at the tiles. It's going to actually run the application for a few seconds, try to make sure it doesn't throw any exceptions, and so on. And once we do that and the application passes the local kind of certification, then we have some more confidence sending that to the actual store for actual certification. Because what Microsoft does is first run the store kit on your app. That's the first thing they do automatically. And if that fails, your application fails immediately. So you should run it on your machine automatically, or at least before you're trying to submit an app. And only then, if that passes successfully, there's some chance you're going to pass the actual certification. It doesn't guarantee anything, of course, because Microsoft is doing manual testing as well for your app, trying to make sure that it behaves nicely. It has some nice features, because the application has to be useful. It has to give something. I can't write just a hello world application, just send that, because it's not useful. It's going to fail certification. And it's going to, Microsoft is going to check that it's not throwing exceptions. If it's throwing exception, the application is terminated, and that's obviously bad, and that kind of application will not pass certification. So that's some guidelines you should be aware of. So that's the things I want to talk about today, and that's actually, I think, concludes these 3-part sessions. I hope you enjoyed that and learned something, and this should give you a kind of a head start when you're trying to develop your own applications. You should use MVVM, you should use data binding, you should use the special phone features, especially live tiles, but also perhaps TOS notifications and the various hardware devices that's possible to access. And there are other things I haven't talked about, such as background tasks and so on, but simply not enough time in these sessions. But this should give you a good starting point, and you can find more information naturally on the MVVM documentation, and there are various other blog posts by many people around the world, and there's the Windows Phone 8 Jumpstart from Microsoft that you can actually watch as well, kind of a 2-day course that can also give you some more information on some other features you may want to use. So that's it. If you have any questions, you can feel free to write me an email. You can see here my email. You can also read my blog. I'm writing about Windows Phone sometimes, writing about other stuff, but Windows Phone also. I'll try to help as best I can. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Pavel, so much. Really, it was very interesting, 3 sessions, and very useful. Thank you very much, and thank you, attendees, for your attending, and have a good day, everybody. Thank you.